Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Charles van der Walt. I'm the head of security research for Orange Cyber Defense. Our discussion today is about vulnerability management, and specifically vulnerability management in the sort of post-COVID or COVID reality, where a large number of our users are connecting from home. I'll be sharing just a brief introduction to the topic, but before I do that, I want to take a moment to introduce my co-panelists. We've got a very, I think, exciting group of people gathered today. First and foremost is a good friend and colleague of ours, Jeff White. Jeff is a cybercrime journalist, very well versed in issues of cybersecurity and cybercrime, and author of an exciting new book called Crime.com. Jeff said that if you can teach him how to solve a Rubik's Cube, he will send you a copy of the book, no matter where you are in the world. Alongside Jeff, we have Melanie. Jeff is based in the UK, by the way, as you can tell from his bow tie. Alongside him is Melanie. Melanie is based in France. I keep forgetting where. And she is a product manager with Orange Cyber Defense, specialized in vulnerability management products. We'll ask her at the end of the session to just spend talking you through the kinds of support and solutions we can offer as a group in vulnerability management. Then we have Pedro de Souza. He's based in Pretoria, South Africa. Pedro heads up one of our vulnerability management capabilities, where he looks after something like 60 clients for us, performing scans on their internal infrastructure, internet-facing systems, and web applications. Malik is based in the Netherlands. Forgive me if I'm wrong, Malik. No, in Belgium. That's a sort of mistake that gets you into a bar fight. And he's a solution specialist, which is sort of like being in pre-sales, and again, particularly focused on vulnerability management. Malik brings a very real sort of on-the-ground customer perspective, in that he understands what our customers are looking for and what problems they're facing. And then finally, definitely the most good-looking person on our panel is probably also the smartest. Wilfried is also based in Paris. He heads up a capability within Orange Cyber Defense called the Vulnerability Watch Service, where they perform very high-level, detailed analysis of vulnerabilities on technologies. Over 5,000 technologies they monitor, and they track those vulnerabilities, the exploits, campaigns against them, patches, etc., and develop a feed which goes out to our clients who are interested in understanding what's going on in their spaces. So that's our panel today, and you'll be hearing from all of them. Also feel free to shoot them questions via our WebEx console. And throughout the session, we'll also be dropping a few poll questions just to get some inputs from you on how you see the lay of the land, so we can all kind of learn from each other. Good. So we're talking today about a COVID-based reality. This is not a session about COVID, it's a session about vulnerability management. But we're talking in the context of COVID, and I think it's fair to say now you must all be familiar with this notion that COVID really changed the world in some very, I don't want to use the word unprecedented, so I'm not, but in some very noteworthy ways. And some things are definitively different now to what they were 6 months ago. So kind of the background to this session is that when the crisis broke, myself and my team were asked to, research and consider some thoughts on, how that would change the world, what we would expect to see, and how our customers should respond to that. And we wrote a very long, lengthy, wordy paper on all of the impacts that we anticipated. We've got time in another session. We can share with you, which one of those these panned out and which ones didn't. But that's not the topic for today. But out of all of these different movements, out of all of these developments that we were considering, we then tried to deduce kind of what the net effect would be. What is the emergent threat model? And we argued that that emerging threat model would be the function of some exacerbating factors, so some movements that would make the security situation worse for us, some mitigating factors, so elements that might make the security situation easier for us, and then a whole bunch of constants which really don't change whether you're in COVID or not. And if we sort of reduced all of that down, we argued that there were really 5 impacts. First, that employees would be more vulnerable to social engineering scams. As it happens, that turned out to be true at the beginning of the crisis, but that curve has flattened out. It's no longer, in my view, such a big factor. We then said that you have less control and visibility over the IT systems you protect than you're used to. That obviously by virtue of the fact that so much is happening from the user's home. At that point, we still consider to be true, and is a big part of the reason for today's conversation. Very closely related to that, we argued that the environments that users would be connecting from were also either fundamentally insecure or poorly configured. Also segues to, also ties into the topic we want to discuss today. So those 2 points together, how do they add up to create a new reality for us? And if so, what should we be doing about that? The 4th point, similarly, I think has an impact on today's conversation, or I expect it will come up, which is to say that we anticipated that there would be this large-scale adoption of either new remote access systems or scaled-up remote access systems. Melanie, I know, has first-hand experience in this because she drove our response to that requirement. And we anticipated that those may not be rolled out always as well as we would like, and that there would be attacks and compromises as a result, which is, incidentally, I maintain, still very true and continues to be true. And then finally, we argued that our customers themselves would be, operating from a place of diminished capacity, having to work from home, maybe not having the systems they would normally have, or perhaps even being ill or distracted. So those were kind of the 5 developments that we distilled, all of this change down to. And then we wrote, a whole lot of thoughts on how our customers should respond. And one of those thoughts had to do with the vulnerability management of endpoints. And we, and particularly me, anticipated that this would be a real challenge for clients, that with laptops and phones now not coming into the office, wouldn't be able to scan them, it would be difficult to patch them, there may not be bandwidth, and that would present a real challenge to people. And in addition, that the IT they use at home, their own phones, their own computers, maybe their Samsung TVs or their ADSL routers, would also become a problem where we don't have visibility, we don't have control, and patching is a challenge. And it's really this question that we want to discuss today, just to explore whether that thesis was in fact true, to what extent people have been affected by the crisis, what are changes in terms of vulnerability management, and what our response to that should be. We don't have a specific clear message for you. We've designed this to be a free-flowing conversation where Jeff's job will be to pull various perspectives from our panelists, and once again we invite you to drop questions into the channel so that we can respond to those questions. So that's all there is from me. I leave you just with these links, which you can use to find the original COVID paper and all those kind of supporting materials that we developed. If you're interested, Medina has also shared them as a resource on this WebEx, so you can download it directly. And with that, Jeff, I'm going to hand over to you.
There we go. Thanks, Charles. I really appreciate it. That was a really good intro, and it'll be interesting to see what folks on the call think of this. We've got a number of polls that we're going to do throughout this, little just questions we're going to ask just to get soundings from you guys, and we're going to use those then to jump into our fantastic set of panelists. So I'm going to bring up the first poll now. which hopefully you should be able to see on screen. Question we're asking is, does having users working from home make vulnerability management in your organization more complex? So basically, as Charles pointed out, there's a massive working from home shift, and you've now got a whole bunch of vulnerability management tasks and challenges ahead. Is that made it more complex? So you can select one, yes or no, very simple, and we'll get the results in and we'll use that to jump off into our panelists. So leave it a couple of seconds, make your choice, yes or no. By the way, as Charlotte said, I am wearing a bow tie. Frankly, these webinars are the only chance I get to dress up these days and not wear pajamas. I am, of course, naked from the waist down. And while you try and get that mental image out of your heads, let's see if we can go. Can we go to the results of this one? Let's see what we've got. Because I'm going to go to Malik after this and just see whether his experiences match it. Yes, an 80. That is a resounding. That is a referendum-winning result there. In a way, not a surprise, but Malik, presumably that's what you're seeing with the folks that you're speaking to. Can you unpack it a little bit? What are the sort of complexities around working from home and vulnerability management for us?
Yeah, so it's all, I think, matters. So I think the 90%, so I think 1/5, you can see that they don't find it more complex. So that's maybe also an interesting thing to look into. I think those people, just an assumption, of course, are already used to be with people working from home, I think. So really depending on how it's baked in your business or in your working environment, you will probably already have some procedures or policies regarding that. So then it won't be more difficult if there are more people working from home. Of course, there is a lot of clients and businesses that's currently rapidly shifted towards working from home, and given the availability to end users to work from home. Of course, then some technical issues start to pop up, like the VPN, will it be an always-on VPN or a split VPN? Of course, if an always-on VPN is being pushed or being enrolled from the business, then we also see that the complex is not that difficult, because you eventually just it's almost the same as you're working from the office. Of course, a split tunnel VPN, then you are more dependent on the end customer or the end user, that they effectively install the patches they are being pushed, and then it's also hard to, I think, maintain and to get insights of whether that patch is being implemented properly, and if you roll it out to 100 devices, to do all 100 devices effectively have the patch implemented. So I think that's the most complex part about remote users, is that it's hard to get insights and also hard to double check if the patch vulnerability is being implemented properly.
Pedro, I want to come to you on this. It's interesting this. So most organizations will have policies, or will have had policies for working from home. Is it just the case that it's really hard to scale those up from applying to a few people to applying to everybody, or is there something else going on? Is there another problem here that we've got?
I think it also depends on the organization and where the individuals are located. In certain countries, like for example in South Africa, bandwidth limitations, we have things like load shedding as well, where power, for example, gets switched off for certain periods of long times. And the other thing that's noted as well is also IT experience of the actual end users as well. In some cases, organizations have highlighted that one of their concerns from the end users is they install the update and they're no longer to access the relevant application, or their computer is down. Now, as the IT no longer has the means, for example, walking over to the next door for assistance, they sort of get stuck now with the situation. They have an employee that no longer can actually do what they actually want to do. So I think there's a lot of things around it that also causes complexity. And previously, a lot of the organizations with the work from home, it was sort of a phased approach, or only select individuals. Now you have pretty much your entire workforce that's allocated or pretty much has to work from home, causing strains on various environments where, for example, it may not have been catered for previously.
I mean, obviously you're in touch daily with your clients. Are there instances you've come across where some of those clients have really handled it well? Is there sort of any wisdom you can share of how an organization has done well at this?
To be honest, I think a lot of them are adapting. I think that definitely from our clients, definitely it's the biggest push, and it's something that we're continuously evolving on. I think initially there was a lot of issues. Sometimes capacity was a bigger issue with resolving that. And also pretty much just encouraging clients and making sure that the devices were equipped for the work from home. I think we're gradually seeing quite a rapid uptake now with the work from home, sustainability of that, and devices actually being better equipped in that regard.
This one probably for Charles or Wilfried. I just wondered, I mean, you know, we're obviously looking at vulnerabilities. Have we seen as a result of COVID a massive increase in either the number or the severity of them? I don't know if it's possible to put a global figure on, but is that something you're worried about, that A, we're having trouble catching up, but B, also there's a bigger threat on the other side to deal with?
I can weigh in then on that. I suspect Wilfried will have a better perspective. But my sense has been that the threat has changed, but the vulnerability hasn't really changed. So the trends that we were seeing before in terms of the types and severity of vulnerabilities, you know, that's consistent. That's not a function of where people are. What changes is our ability to manage the vulnerabilities that will get impacted. And in particular, I think it's like attacks against the endpoint, which we really anticipated would be big, and social engineering type attacks. I get the feeling actually really didn't change that markedly. Attacks against home IT, like home routers, where I really thought there would be change. There were a few instances early on, but then that sort of that faded away. Where we are seeing very definitive movement is attacks against remote access systems and perimeter technologies. Anyone who's tracking that space at the moment will know not only are we dealing with almost a firestorm of vulnerabilities in, you know, serious remote access platforms, but they're also being actively, you know, targeted, compromised, and then exploited, which is probably the least of the things that we anticipated would happen. But if I can have just one more minute, the last thing I would say on that topic is that was a trajectory that existed before COVID. So I'm not convinced that actually working from home is the contributing factor there.
Wilfried, if you've got anything to feed into that? I'm not sure. We may have lost Wilfried on that point. You know, I heard this happening to the Today program on BBC Radio 4 this morning. They managed to lose both of their guests, which left the presenter in a slightly awkward position. So I want to come back to Charlotte on that point. You've talked obviously about the kind of things you're seeing and kind of things you're not seeing. I am interested in this slightly Donald Rumsfeld-esque question of the unknown unknowns. People I've spoken to, it's a really interesting picture emerging of, because things are being rolled out with such speed, because things are changing with such speed, your ability to baseline what's normal and your ability to spot deviations from that normality is diminished. And I wonder whether there's a whole bunch of stuff out there that we're just not aware of because we're not monitoring it because things are changing too fast. Do you see what I mean? And what do you think of that?
I think that's always true, but I'll give you sort of two data points that suggest to me that it's probably safe to assume that we're not seeing it because it's not there. The first is when we had a similar session to this about endpoint threat detection, you know, as a problematic which we assumed would emerge and get exacerbated in the same way as endpoint vulnerability management. And when we asked the poll question to attendees on that seminar, whether, you know, the work from home thing had impacted their ability to observe their endpoints, the poll results were almost inverted. You know, the people all said, no, we were ready for this. And I think that's because kind of threat detection has moved to the endpoint very steadily over the last few years. EDR has matured, the products are out there, they're working, they're on the, you know, on the desktops. And so actually visibility wasn't compromised that much. So that's kind of the first data point that I have. But the other one is I just like I clearly may be missing stuff, but I'm just not aware of any significant security incident, compromise, breach that occurred because somebody was working from home. You know, I can't think of one significant one. So again, I might be missing it, but it just doesn't seem to be happening. Jeff Wilfried indicated to me that he is online. He was just muted. I don't know if you want to send that question back at him again.
We're receiving you. Feel free to chime in.
Yeah, we're good now?
Good, we hear you.
Yeah, just wanted to add is I was totally agree with Charles. We didn't observe some increase of vulnerability during the COVID crisis, but the fact it's not the element of vulnerabilities. This is a process to the patch management. There's some difference between to patch between with a specific team and specific lab and all your IT team at home. The process are changing. You have to be more proactive and more reactive with some high targeted vulnerabilities that could be target you external systems such as firewalls, VPN systems, especially VPN systems when all your users are connected during the day with specific features. The big goal is to have a lot of perfect processes to be sure all kind of vulnerabilities will be patches in time, and in time is could be some hours. For example, yesterday Cisco published a critical vulnerability for VPN systems, and this vulnerability might be very dangerous for some companies that didn't patch in a few hours. We observed some exploitation in the wild less than 24 hours after the publication by Cisco. So the main goal is to be reactive and also proactive for this kind of issue.
But I want to go back to Pedro then in that case, because the picture you painted, Pedro, was of organizations slightly struggling to be able to react with people working from home. Is that a challenge then? If you have something like Wilfried said there, you've got a few hours to patch this, get going. There are some sounds like there are some problems with organizations being able to do that on the ground, right?
No, definitely. I think it also depends how the environment is set up. In some cases, we've noticed like key resources, as soon as there's a massive vulnerability detected on it or available in that, a general approach can be, for example, taking it offline, completely walling it off, or protecting it in that way, and taking that action until appropriate remediation and testing can be done. Because in a lot of cases, just because, for example, on key systems that we've seen in internal environments, you don't just want to push a patch and then, for example, all services or operational functionality goes down as well. So in those approaches, it has to go through a more steady processing. And what's nice with the way that we've seen clients approaching it is a more steadied or phased approach, where, for example, lockdown, restrict as much access as possible, and then take action from that side.
Just, I want to go to it. We've got a poll question which might be quite handy on this sort of stuff, because we're starting to get into sort of detection technologies. So we can go to this next poll question. I think it's quite an interesting one. We'll have a chat about it afterwards. So the question is, do you currently use agent-based scanning in your environment? Simple yes or no. Nice binary. So sometimes concern about agent scanning and deploying these agents. What do they collect? What can they view? How can they be successfully removed? In some cases, clients feel more comfortable using authenticated scans via a scanner appliance, because if they ever change the scanning solution, they can simply change the credentials. So let's have a look and see where people sit on this. It's a simple yes or no question. Do you currently use agent-based scanning in your environment? Yes or no? I'm tempted to, oh, is there a question there? No, that's fine. Good stuff. And whenever we're ready, we can hopefully see the results of that poll. Let's see whether we got responses. Oh, okay. There's a few more yeses than nos, but a bit of a mixed picture. Malik, I wonder, chat to us about this. Is this in the pre-sales area? This must come up. Are organizations reluctant to do this? And if so, why? Or is it becoming more common? What's the picture?
Yeah, so what you definitely see is that it's more and more becoming a requirement in the evaluation of purchasing and vulnerability management solution. So we indeed see that nowadays without agent-based scanning, it would be very hard, of course, depending on your current setup, to scan external devices, mobile devices, working from home or being in the cloud or somewhere else. So we see also that authenticate scan is of course run from a central instance. If everyone is in the office, it's of course very easy because you're just connected to the internal VLAN. If they are working from home, then you need to have a VPN up and running. And if you don't enforce a VPN connection, you can't actually scan them externally. So an agent is much easier to get track of your endpoints. And it's also, it gives you where we see that most companies, but of course, correct me if I'm wrong, Pedro, do a weekly or a daily scan. An agent most commonly sends multiple times a day the information about the agent, what software is running, what vulnerabilities are on the device, and so on. It sends its multiple times a day to the central console for reporting. So we will have a lot quicker time to reaction when a critical vulnerability is being found on endpoints or single endpoints. And then you can also react on that much faster.
So that's interesting. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so we definitely see, just to finalize, we definitely see an increase in interest in agent-based scanning. But of course, we see that some customers are a bit more a bit more safer around what information is being gathered and so on. The general trend, I would say, is that agent-based scanning is more and more important focused.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's the solution specialist view, and I wonder, Pedro, can you give us a sort of view from the ground, because obviously you're dealing with clients who are actually rolling these things out. What are the sort of issues from the battlefield? What are the kind of issues with agent-based scanning, and how's that play out in the real world?
Sure thing, Jeff. So I think agent-based scanning definitely, as Malek's highlighted, numerous advantages. If there's a new vulnerability detected, for example, you don't need to wait for the next week's scan for actually to run through your environment and all of those things. There's a concern though with a lot of our environments, though, pretty much as highlighted, what exactly happens with these agents, and also a commitment to the solution. So let's say we use a particular scanning suite. And we decide to move away from that later on. How do you ensure that's actually removed? What does this actually collect in your environment? How do you ensure that the information is sent securely to the various cloud as well? We've also seen scenarios where, for example, in DMZ environments, that clients feel more comfortable using, obviously, the internal appliances in these locations. With the growth of cloud environments and those various machines deployed in that, clients are noting that agent-based solutions can help aid with the detection in those environments. For the endpoints though, one thing that's been highlighted by a few of our clients is discussing different ways they can successfully deploy this to their client machines. Obviously, issues with the VPNs, if things go wrong, what happens with that? And pretty much those steps that now, how do you actually ensure and aid the clients in those regards? So it's an adventure, Jeff.
It's an adventure. Choose your own adventure. I want to pick up on this VPN vulnerabilities thing, because maybe this is my sort of facile, non-techie view of this, but I do see this VPN thing as being a sort of central point of failure. And again, I want to come to Charles and Wilfried about this. It strikes me we're putting a lot of faith in that VPN connection. Is that misplaced? Am I right to be worried, or what?
Wilfried, why don't you shoot? I've always got too much to say on this subject.
I guess to be honest, everyone has to be worried for any vulnerabilities targeting the system, not especially VPN. Could be related to routers, firewalls, could be related to mailboxes, mail systems, Active Directories. There is no worst case or better case. But there is something to do first, is to be sure the virtual feature of the company is out of running. So for example, you say VPN, when all the company, close to 100% of people is connecting to the VPN, you have to be sure the VPN features is operational and will be operational in time. If there's some vulnerabilities affecting the availability of the feature or the confidentiality of data, yeah, of course, you have to be proactive on that and to be sure all processes for patch management will include this kind of information related to our targeted system.
Jeff, can I throw in a perspective there? I find this trend fascinating because it seems very clear to me that the level of targeting and kind of active compromise of security or remote access appliances has escalated. And it seems likely to continue escalating. And I've got two views on it. The one is, for our presentation at Black Hat now in August, we examined the security of VPN products, not in terms of remote compromise, other attributes, but one of the things we had to do is we had to configure and test 5 VPN technologies to check their resilience against the same levels of threats. And we wanted to configure them very specifically to understand whether they were capable of mitigating the threats that we were highlighting. So we're going to deep in the innards of it. And the thing that hit us probably sort of more than anything else that we learned from the research was just the level of complexity. They are mind-blowingly complex, and they sit internet exposed on the perimeter of your network. And they have to operate on a really low level. Also, they're parsing packets, they're creating virtual tunnels on your endpoints. I mean, it's a bold technology to undertake to build. And so I think it's not surprising that there's vulnerabilities in them. And I think there's sort of been a myth of the secure security device that we've sort of lived with for years. I think what's emerging now is, security technology is not a secure technology. Those things are not the same thing. But the other point I would add, which I think is very interesting, is we've been examining the timelines of vulnerabilities in these appliances from kind of discovery by the vendor to remediation by the customer. And what you can see very clearly is that the vendors are very astute. They have very mature programs, C-certs. They jump on something quickly. They advise their customers very quickly. They have detailed information. That in turn allows, for example, within our SOCs, that in turn allows our engineers to identify the affected customers, triage, design solutions, workarounds, or patches. And generally, we'll find that the bulk of that work, once we hear about it from a vendor, will be resolved within 7 days. 75% of that'll be done quickly. Then we have to go to the customer. We have to go to each customer independently and advise them on the workaround or the patch that's required. And as Wilfried said, this is on a technology that now 10,000 people are coming into your network through. What we find then, customer, to when the issue actually gets remediated on their appliance, the bulk of that sits between 30 and 90 days, because all these issues that Wilfried raised have to be considered. What is the risk? What with downtime? When do we schedule it for? What if something goes wrong? We can't bring our remote users back in again. How do we even talk to them? It becomes like a massive thing. And so in a bizarre way, the sort of ecosystem within which these security appliances have to live makes them in some way more vulnerable than the traditional endpoint, where you kind of have autonomy. You can push something out to the endpoint. Something fails, you deal with one user.
Yeah. Really interesting. By the way, we're sort of coming to the kind of second half of the session, and there's going to be time for questions at the end. So obviously you've got the opportunity to get free consultancy advice from Wilfried, Pedro, Malik, and Charles. And Melanie's going to be talking to us at the end from sort of product point of view. So good times to ask questions as a couple come in. So do type out your questions in the question bit, and we'll try and get around to those at the end. But I want to just come to, we talked about the lengths of time to patch these things, and we've got a poll question, handily enough, on that exact topic, which hopefully we can bring up now, and we'll see what you reckon on this one. Multiple choice on this. How long do you take to patch a confirmed vulnerability? How long does it take you? Is it hours, days, weeks, or months? This is an anonymous poll, so we are not gathering, at least I'm not gathering information on who says what. So it gives an indication of how long it takes to patch those vulnerabilities. As Charles said, a lot of remote working really does throw up a lot of interesting thorny issues about how you do this and how you don't crash your entire organization with patching that previously would have worked out quite well if everybody was in the office, but everybody's working from home. So there we go. Hours, days, weeks, or months. Be honest, hit the button, and then we will have a look at the results and see what happens thereafter. And as I say, you've got the opportunity to ask some questions if you want to. So let's have a look, see, hopefully we should be able to bring up some results on that, and then we'll go, oh, that's interesting. Okay, so some people have been honest and said months, thanks. But we're looking between days, days and weeks there. I mean, Pedro, is this, it strikes me that this, this is just organizations trying to sort of deal with the situation that they've got in front of them. Again, is there good advice and good sort of wisdom you can share about tactics organizations have used to be able to patch quicker, to get into the hours column rather than the days and weeks and months column?
So definitely, in cases with outlines, just having set up test environments that replicate sort of key functionality. Obviously, as well, for it's highlighted, you don't want to cause critical issues in your environment or affect the operation of the organization. In other cases, just in terms of websites, for example, key things, SQL injection and those things, different approaches clients have taken specifically to that. Generally, approaches can either be locking down that functionality until proper testing can be done and completion on those things, as well as looking at different approaches. We also seeing cases, Jeff, just to highlight, where organizations, obviously with the external perimeter being a big thing, that pretty much asset inventory is becoming a key, pretty much thing, an aspect for your entire organization. And what we mean by that is you can't protect what you don't know about in your organization. So on top of definitely having key processes to detect these vulnerabilities, definitely essential, but also making sure that you have the knowledge and proper processes to manage those assets as well.
That's an interesting one. Malik, I mean, talk to us about that. When you're talking to organizations and positioning things for future work, to what extent do organizations have a real handle, as Pedro said, on where their assets are and what's valuable and where it sits?
Yeah, that's definitely something that's sometimes lacking on knowing what's on your environment is one thing. The second thing is also the ability to prioritize your assets. Vulnerability, critical vulnerability found on an endpoint or critical vulnerability found on a server, critical server. It's very a different risk. So we definitely in our choice to advise the customer in a solution, we definitely let them take a look at that risk scoring. So it's called sometimes real risk score. So it's based on, okay, the vulnerability, is there an active exploit currently running for that vulnerability, or what device is the vulnerability found? So really some metadata that translates a vulnerability in a risk score. And that's very important to also align your SLA or your ability to react on it. So for example, you want to respond in hours for a critical vulnerability found on a critical asset, but maybe you want to respond on days or weeks, days of course, on assets that are less critical. So that's definitely something very interesting, and this is also more patch management policy related than vulnerability management related. But vulnerability management should definitely give the needed information for your patch management to run smoothly. That's definitely something, and a generic trend that I definitely see is that the time between a vulnerability being found and an exploit being available, then I mean public available, it's really starting to become shorter and shorter. So we do actually see the need to respond in hours for some critical vulnerabilities when there is an active exploit, and definitely if the exploit is on a certain script kiddie level, so basically everyone with the basic computer knowledge can run that exploit, then it's definitely, yeah, you should be patching it within a couple of hours.
It's interesting that, yeah, I mean, in the poll, we haven't sort of asked, how long does it take to patch a critical vulnerability? And we haven't looked at, patch a critical vulnerability for this particular bit of data or on that particular asset. So we've taken quite a sort of basic approach to that. I've just expanded our questions section and discovered a couple of questions in there. So I'm going to ask them now. We can go back, actually, we can get rid of the poll now and go back to our cameras and see the panelists' lovely faces, I think. This question's come in, probably one for Charles and Wilfried, I think. Do you think that now users are working on their own distinctive LANs, LANs, it will change the methodologies of virus writers that traditionally relied on flat networks and systems being able to see each other more easily? Charles, Wilfried, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know Carl is so he's clearly just showing off how smart he is. But I don't know that we know the answer to that yet. But Carl is correct in saying that the traditional kind of land and what is that term? The sort of land and spread approach, which used SMB scanning on port 445 or whatever the case was. If the VPN is not always on, that does become more complicated. I don't think that vector is is going to work as well anymore. And so you would imagine that some adaptation would have to occur there. But that said, if you look at how kind of the ransomware landscape is evolving independently, the actors seem to have made the shift, or seem to be very deliberately making a shift away from the sort of spray and pray approach, where they try and drop ransomware on someone's endpoint and then infect as many endpoints as they can from there, to much more targeted approaches where they gain access into the environment. For example, very popularly via vulnerable VPNs or Citrix gateways or something like that, and then insert the malware, if you like, through the back door, which isn't as dependent on this on the flat network thing anymore.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be as constrained by the VPN. So I wonder if the adaptation hasn't already started happening. And again, interestingly, not because of COVID, but anyway.
What was going on anyway? Yeah. Got another question here from Jeffrey Meerschiet. I may have got the pronunciation wrong. How are companies adapting to the threats on digital channels outside of the infrastructure? So social media, deep and dark web, etc. Because obviously a lot of what we've been talking about is sort of infrastructure based. So the question is, how have they been adapting to threats on digital channels outside of that? Any of the panelists want to address that one?
Do you look at this stuff at all, Malik?
Yeah, so I don't know if I completely understand the question. Could you repeat it one more time, John?
The question is, how are companies adapting to the threats on digital channels outside of the infrastructure? Brackets, social media, deep, dark web, etc. So I imagine that the point is, you've got threats coming at you from Twitter and Facebook and so on. You've also got information being exposed in the dark web and vulnerabilities being exposed in the dark web. To what extent are companies sort of looking outwards as well as looking inwards at their own networks? I guess that's, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm hoping that's.
Yeah, I think in addition to that question, indeed, that I think the question is originated from the lack of insights on what the end user is actually exactly doing remotely from home. So I think previously everything is being, when they work at the office, everything is most commonly tunneled via a firewall where you can see and even enforce or block certain website categories. For example, gamble is a standard use case. But if a user is working remote and you don't have a full tunnel VPN, we're here again with the VPN story, then you don't have the insights on what the person is actually doing. And also we see well, it already existed, but that might be something that's becoming more and more common, maybe. That via Twitter or Facebook, some social engineering or some malware is getting on the endpoint. And then, of course, if you don't have a proper VPN of some security solution in between that can filter these requests and responses, then you have a bigger chance of being breached or being impacted. So yeah, there are I think definitely solutions in the market on kind of monitoring that. But I think hardening your endpoint should be priority number one via an endpoint security solution or an vulnerability management solution. The combination of both already gives you a lot of hardening protection. And really, your endpoint will be the last, well, not the last line, but will be a strong, structured device where maybe malware gets onto the device but doesn't get run or doesn't get exploited or doesn't get impacted.
Doesn't get detonated. Fascinating. Talking of endpoints, we are sort of nearing the endpoint of this webinar. So I'm going to hand over to Melanie to wrap things up. But meanwhile, obviously, thank you to Malik, to Pedro, to Wilfried, and to Charles. Some really interesting insights there. And as they said, there's some handouts there. And of course, there are methods by which you can get in touch with these good folks separate to the webinar if you've got burning questions or things you wanted to ask. But I'll hand over to Melanie now. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Jeff. So I have some slides to share. I don't know, Charles, if you want to share it.
Thank you.
So we can all see it.
Yes, Melanie, give me a second. Sorry.
No problem.
This.
So meanwhile, I will introduce myself. So good afternoon, everyone. I am Melanie Pilpré, so I'm product manager for vulnerability management solutions. So my role is to build a managed service for vulnerability management, taking into consideration the context and the challenges of our customers, but also to create some synergies between the different internal teams, because we have a lot of experts for vulnerability scanning, vulnerability monitoring, ethical hacking as well. So the idea is to provide you with one global solution, a single solution with one single point of contact for the vulnerability management. So this is the aim of the vulnerability management solution.
Jeff, do you want to show that other poll question maybe while they...
Oh yeah, let's do another poll while we're loading up the slides. Actually, before we do that, Melanie, I wanted to ask, I mean, you've been listening in on the conversation so far. Are there things that have sort of stood out to you? Is there anything that we've been chatting about that you've really picked up on and thought, yes, that's the key, that's what I'd really flag up?
Not really. I think I will go a bit more in depth during the presentation on the different topics. But yes, we had a very good expert, so I think we covered the main topic.
Okay, let's that's a good idea. Let's go to another poll question just while we're waiting. So this one, another simple yes or no. Has COVID and the work from home scenario accelerated your business's cloud strategy or roadmap? Because obviously cloud was on everybody's minds before, and we wonder whether it's got more on your mind as a result of COVID and the global pandemic. We'll see there's a rapid adaptation of cloud technology given our working from home environment. So it's simple yes or no on this. Has COVID accelerated your business's cloud strategy or roadmap with all of the course the security sort of vulnerabilities and business integration ability difficulties that go along with that, which I might ask Pedro about if we get time. So it's a yes or no from that. Has COVID and the work from home scenario accelerated your business's cloud strategy or roadmap? Let's have a look when we've got the results and see what happens there. Oh, 67% That's interesting, isn't it? That's really, we should, you know, a good follow-up question would be how fast has it accelerated? How much have you accelerated? But that's interesting. I mean, Pedro, is that how does that factor into your job, sort of taking care of clients and looking after their vulnerability management when they start beefing up their cloud migration?
So currently what we're seeing a lot of our clients do is just experimenting with the different cloud technologies, currently seeing what they can offer and how best they can support the environment, obviously with your Google Cloud, Azure, and AWS. Now, what we're also seeing is each of these different ones upskilling of staff. So there's quite a bigger focus currently on actually just choosing the right technology and sort of discussions with us in how we can support them during that process. So I'm going to say for now, currently, the biggest focus is more of a focus on learning and actually gaining that understanding of how best to utilize it. Sorry.
No, it's good answer. A gorilla answer popped in at the last moment. I think we may be almost ready to share Melanie's slides. Melanie, do they look familiar to you? Is that what you were expecting?
Yes, that's fine. If we can have those slides in full screen, it will be perfect. So first of all, maybe let me go a little bit more in depth into some market context and some challenges we have identified in order to build our managed solution. So the first challenge is about the complex technological environment we have to face today. So before it was much more easy. Companies only had a single data centers with all the people, all the data at the same place. But now it's getting more complex. We have hybrid infrastructure with traditional DC, also virtualized environment, public cloud environment, and we have to take this into consideration because it increases the attack surface of the companies. The next challenge is about the difficulty to patch in time. Most of the time, there is only one team and sometimes only one people on board in order to patch and to correct the vulnerabilities. And they are getting overwhelmed by all the information they receive from editors, from analysts, from specialists, etc. They're receiving a lot of emails, a lot of information, and they are racing against time in order to apply the correction. The next challenge is about the lack of contextualized information. So the security teams are receiving a lot of information, but they are not relevant. They are not contextualized information into their environment. So that means they have to analyze this information to be able then to prioritize the different correction and the different countermeasures. And the last challenge is about the attackers that are getting ahead of you, trying to find the vulnerabilities and that are able to organize some cyber attack because they already know the vulnerabilities you have into your information system. So we need to race against time again. So these are the challenges we have identified, and then how can we answer to these challenges? How can Orange Cyber Defense help you for the vulnerability management of your infrastructure? So if we're moving to the next slide, we are going to have the answers. So 4 advantages we have identified for our vulnerability management solution and to support you. So the first advantage is about to delegate the vulnerability monitoring and the analysis to our experts. So by doing so, you will save time, and also our experts are able to receive a lot of information from different information sources, data sources. So they will have more information that your team can receive. So it will be more complete and also with a different level of expertise because they are experts on their domain. The second advantage, what we want is to make you improve your reactivity and you getting ahead of the attackers for the vulnerabilities. So we are going to send you only contextualized information into your environment. So that means, for example, for vulnerability monitoring, if you are asking us to put in surveillance a specific software, we are going to ask you several questions in order to know what is the level of criticality of these specific assets, and then to provide you with a specific scoring, an environmental scoring dedicated to your environment. It means for two different companies, for same vulnerability, they won't have the same environmental scoring because they don't have the same environment. So this is contextualized information, and so time saving for your employees. The third point is about being informed of all the cybersecurity news and alerts. So again, you are going to save time because you are not going to do the watch of different cybersecurity news. We are going to send you a daily email with all the different news that you should be aware of, and also a specific email when there is an alert, a pandemic situation you should be aware of. You will have an email with all the information, the description, and the action if there are some action to do on your side. And the last advantage is that we are providing you with a managed solution. So we are going to support you during the whole time of the contract. So if you have any question, any doubt, anything to ask, the support team is here for you. You can reach them by phone, by email, by opening a ticket. So yes, the support team is here for you. So the solution I'm mentioning is vulnerability intelligence. So I was telling you about the global solution we are aiming to provide you with in order to make you having one single point of contact for the vulnerability management. So this is the solution, and this solution is composed of 4 different parts. So we have one global solution for vulnerability, but specific topics according to your needs. So if we are moving to the next slide, so we have the watch solution, which is actually vulnerability monitoring solution. So it means you are telling us all the products, all the assets you want to put into surveillance, and we are going to do the surveillance for you. As soon as we discover a new vulnerability, we are going to send you a bulletin with a short description of the vulnerability, the different risks this vulnerability can lead to, but also the different correction you can use to be protected against this vulnerability. And also, as I said before, you will have a specific scoring for this vulnerability, so you will be able to prioritize the different correction thanks to this information. So if we are moving to the next slide, we are going to see the second part of the solution, which is Detect. So Detect is our vulnerability scanning solution. So we are providing you with a scanning solution to scan your network, your systems, and your applications, and then you will be able to have a real-time view of your attack surface. So this is the second part of the solution. The third part is ethical hacking. If you want to go a little bit more in depth into the definition of your attack surface, we can do a simulated attack in order to reach, for example, specific assets, specific infrastructure. So it's something we discussed with you before, and then we will be able to identify all the vulnerability into your companies. It can be technical vulnerabilities, but also human vulnerabilities, because we are doing social engineering with ethical hacking team. And the last part of the solution is check code. This solution is focused on the applications. So if you have some websites, some applications you have the lead on, we can audit this application. We can audit the source code of this application, this website, and provide you with all the vulnerabilities that are already in these applications, and also with the correction you should apply in order to be protected. So this is all the package. We can provide you with vulnerability intelligence. Of course, this is flexible, and the service can be chosen one by one. It's not compulsory. You don't need to choose the first of them. You can select only the service you need. And so, yes, this is our managed service. So if you have any question, do not hesitate to reach us. Yes, we will be more than happy to answer you or to have your feedback on this solution.
Good stuff. Thanks for that, Melanie. I think we're almost at the end. Bang on 2 o'clock. Good stuff. I will. Thanks for popping in. Look, by the way, to give the plug. I had a copy of my book anyway, but it's out on 10th of August and it's 25% off on Amazon at the moment. It's a massive bargain discount. So there you go. That's my last plug. But I will hand you back to Charles now in case he's got any final comments. It's great to see you all online, and hopefully soon we'll see each other in real life as well, because I do miss those events. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks to all the panelists, and mostly thank you to all of you who've stuck with us for the hour. We are working hard to make these sessions as useful as we possibly can. So please let us have your feedback on what works and what doesn't, what you'd like to see. We have an enormous breadth and depth of skill and experience that we want to make available to you in a format that works for you. So yeah, shoot us your feedback, shoot us your thoughts, and we'll bring it to you live. And thanks very much, and have a COVID-free day.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Cheers,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.